We're starting on the top of page 29 of the book. I don't know what page it is for you, Steve, but chapter 5. So good morning, everyone. It is the 29th of May, 2024. We're here for another Wednesday morning Bucky call. I don't know, Susan, 15 years and running now, approximately, which is quite amazing that it's been going on that long. It's been a wonderful thing for me, and I hope for all of you. So welcome, Steve, Richard, Ann, and Susan. Joe sent a text. He'll be joining us shortly. He's running behind, he said. Told him we're starting and he could join us in progress. So I heard from Kelly this week. He called me concerning my birthday, and we had a nice visit. Told him about Manu, and he said he would call him straightway and check in on him, see how he's doing. So Manu, if you're watching this ever, we love you. We miss you. Hope you can get back to us soon. And you too, Kelly, if you happen to see this. So we miss those.
Raffers.
Yeah, Raffers for sure. Absolutely. All right. Chapter 5.
We want to do introductions, right?
Yes, we do. Thank you.
Okay.
So Steve, how are you feeling this morning, and what's your intention for this call?
Well, the introductions are really important for me. I'm feeling pretty good. What's that?
I agree. I'm sorry I was unconscious.
No, I've made some particular notes and was busting a gut to share, because we shared last time and we actually ended our call an hour and 43 minutes, but we had that deadline to stop at the top of the hour. And so we kind of got cut off in our shares. So we need to leave a lot of good time for sharing on the outtake here. And I had a couple of things that I wanted to talk about because I listened back again at the end of that call. Wow. I hope I can make sense out of my notes, because I'm in beginning this call with some pretty serious intentions here. Richard was commenting on Susan's comment about octaves, and at the end there was this discussion. Susan was talking about, gee, maybe I can tune in to auditory experience of the universe instead of a visual experience of the universe. I'm hoping I'm kind of paraphrasing some of the things that you might have said there. And maybe you said how to hear what I can't see. And then Richard commented about experiencing numbers and ratios as compression and tensions, rather than just as some kind of visual operation. And then Wayne, you talked about visualizing energy, how it flows. I brought up Vipassana and the fact that Vipassana was all about having an experience of reality that is totally non-visual and even non-auditory, but totally sensorial at a kernel level. And then at the end, Susan was talking about Sanskrit and how Sanskrit language was based on words that sounded like the concept. And I mentioned barking and other words in English, and Susan brought up the word automatopoeia, the idea that some words sound like the thing. Well, in Sanskrit, all the words sound like the thing. And what I didn't want to keep the conversation going, I have this book called Prayers of the Cosmos, and this is Aramaic, and this has the Lord's Prayer in Aramaic, and actually gives phonemic the words in Aramaic. So you can say Father, you can say Abun, and it actually has the vibration that the Aramaic intends, which is just like Sanskrit. And so this book is really powerful. It gives the Lord's Prayer, it gives the Aramaic over here, and then it gives the English over here, and then it gives down here, it gives the phonemic transcription, so you can say these words and utter the Lord's Prayer, and it breaks it out all the way through the book. This thing is really powerful, and it's just a tiny book. It's only 82 pages long, but it's had a major effect on me in my life. So I'm so excited. And now we're going to go into chapter 5, which is we're going to continue this conversation about octaves and things. And it's all about Bucky. This chapter is all about Bucky and synergetic wholeness. So I'm real excited and looking forward to it. And good to see you. How are you feeling, and what do you anticipate to get out of today?
Yeah, hi, hello everybody. Good to be back. Yes, I'll just catch up with everybody on the next chapter. Yes, good to be here. And so Susan, how do you feel, and what do you expect to take away today?
I am excited, wanting to continue making connections. Learning seems to be one of the things I like best in the universe. Since I saw you folks, most of the week I've been in Virginia with my boyfriend, sleeping, eating, being a person, having a little bit more time to think, and really, really have been trying to hold myself in that tension, trying to understand the difference between a binary system and a binary system, and what that might actually bring in terms of realization. I tell you, I was not very good at I tried to explain that to boyfriend, harder than it sounds. We had the piece that Steve gave us with the Terrence Howard. And again, even if it's an exercise and even if it isn't all the real truth, because I don't think we're going to get all of the real truth necessarily this lifetime. Certainly exciting. I've had a couple other thinkers kind of drop through in that next week space that were also working on biophysics, particularly looking at the idea that neomelanin that's in our eyes and in the tracts in our brain might be the mechanism by which we are creatures of light. And if you had that understanding, how might you work with it? Somebody else that was working on a machine, Steve, not the same sort of thing that your guy had, but the very first step in what our mitochondria are doing is literally breaking water into molecular hydrogen, which I've had a journey on that, and oxygen. So I got to experience a machine that did that. And then to be able to breathe the molecular hydrogen and to drink the water that's suffused with it and enjoy some sunshine. And so there's just a whole lot of, and it's funny how the names, the faces, the ideas, they start swirling into this spider woman web that's, got its vortex. I'm at the center of its vortex because it's my web. Guys are all in my web, so thank you. And I love these ideas funneling in and the chance that we can each make something out of it and share. Joe, how are you feeling? What would you like to ask?
I'm feeling pretty good. And it's great to see everybody. Sorry, I'm a little bit late, but what am I looking to take out of today? I was actually in a conversation just now, a few moments ago, about the importance of understanding frameworks. So having a framework for kind of applying, the ideas of having universals and understanding how a system works and how the parts interact. That's in a framework, so that you're relying on a set of principles. So I think from that perspective, that's what I'm kind of looking to kind of parse out, because that allows us to see, again, the relationship between the parts, which is essential to synergy. From that perspective, I think that's where I find Bucky's work to be one of the most enlightening, in the sense that approaches, in the sense that the way he looks at a system, looking to dig a little bit deeper into that, as well as the predictability or unpredictability of the parts. It was an interesting discussion that I was just in the sense that how we're applying these concepts of thinking about how the mind works, how it remembers, but how to think about the mind in terms of the whole as opposed to just the part, which would be memorization. And so the ability to put things into context. And that only occurs if we start to think about things from a systemic point of view, not just a particular. So who hasn't gone yet?
Richard and Wayne.
Richard, how you feeling? What do you take away from? What would you take away from today?
Hi, everybody. Good morning. I'm feeling overstimulated. Part of what we were just talking about, but today, to start with, is would have been my father's 120th birthday on May 29th. Yeah, yesterday I watched a junior hockey game out of Saginaw, Michigan, and one of our trainers in that area has been very involved with this kind of work with young people. And one of the exciting things is that the national TV coverage of the hockey game, it kept putting up television ads about a 50-50 fundraising, and at the bottom of the screen it said this fundraising is going to support the Canadian Mental Health Association's Let's Talk program. And the Let's Talk program started 10 years ago in one small hockey town, and it's now across the whole country in different kinds of junior hockey leagues. And the Let's Talk program is anchored with one of our programs. And so it was pretty exciting to see that. Then a Facebook post said somebody in Australia one of our colleagues has just finished working, providing one of our trainings with the UN International Aid Organization somewhere in Europe. And I was at a memorial service on Monday, and I met the daughter. I knew her when she was a little one of a colleague, the colleague that died, who now is at Johns Hopkins, and she's involved in the philosophy of physics, basically. And we had a virtual training project with the Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Department about 20 years ago. And so, and then finally, at this same group, the first students in one of our international social work master's level concentration, the original group was 5 students in 1996. And one of them is someone I've been telling Anne about, she was Chinese Malaysian, born in Malaysia. Then her family had migrated to Malaysia from China. Then they came to Canada, and she was one of my students. And I was telling her all about Anne and her work, and so I need to connect with her, connect Anne's work with her. But it was just a wonderful sort of synchronicity to meet her. Anyway, so and there's some other things. I consulted with a colleague yesterday in Colorado who was asking me how should she talk with pediatric doctors. She was going to meet with some tomorrow, and so we had a great discussion and all about the holistic and the tensegrity and the relationship stuff. And so anyway, it just was overwhelming me. And one last thing that happened last week, I've been following a retired chaplain and his wife, both trainers, who have been traveling from Scotland up the coast of Norway into the Arctic Circle to a town called Tromsø, where our trainings first started in the 1990s. So I was trying to connect him with a person there So if they had a bit of a tour of the city, they could maybe phone call or meet each other as a follow-up to a meeting they had last fall. Well, I sent an email of a phone number to the people on the ship, but they didn't get it because they were off ship and out in some kind of rural hike. Then they came into town and were just walking the street shopping. And they met the person I wanted them to meet in the middle of downtown Tromsø, Norway. So that was pretty exciting. So anyway, that's what I want to get out of it, is a continuation of what we've been discussing and a continuation of this kind of stimulation, but maybe not quite as much as I'm feeling today, because it's almost overwhelming. So that's what my beginnings and what I want to get out of it. And back over to you, Wayne. How are you feeling, and what do you want to get out of it today?
I feel all kinds of things today. Back in 2003, my youngest child, my youngest child, except for my stepdaughter, graduated from high school on June 1st, as I recall. And on June 6th, our first grandson was born. And on June 8th or so, Christy came to me and said, something isn't just right. Would you go get a pregnancy test? And she was indeed with child. And so we doubled down and had two. So once I got the first batch graduated and started over. And today I graduate my youngest officially. So wow. Lexi is graduating this afternoon. So that's what today's all about for our family. And it's been a wonderful 20 years with those kids. It's just been unbelievable. I wouldn't have missed it for anything. So it's a big day for us. I'm excited, Steve, about your preview, as you called it, because since I started studying this kind of a thing, I have wanted to believe, I think I have believed, that the day would come where we would step beyond the limitations of Newtonian physics and learn enough about what it is behind the curtain there that feeds all of the energy into this world, the actual energy, the creative energy, the life energy that obviously is out there. It's always been there, but we seem to have separated ourselves from that for a few centuries and didn't really embrace it as being real. Only the things that were tangible were real. And so as I've watched in my adult lifetime, this wrestling match between the scientists who are locked into Newton and those cutting edge physicists who thought there could be something more, and seen some of those heavily punished because of their efforts, because of their beliefs. I've got books, stacks of books of people who have had those kinds of machines, at least they claimed, and have had them taken away from them in really brutal ways. Schamberger is one of them. He built a flying saucer for Adolf Hitler during the war. It would go by magnetic power, no propulsion whatsoever, way, way, way up in the air, and was controllable. And he and his son had brought all of that to a point they wanted to take it commercially after the war. And he had some people from America invite him over on the auspices that they'd like to look at it and maybe partner up with him or buy it from him or whatever. Susan will, if you've read this part of it, you'll remember they took him and his son out in the desert somewhere in California, I think, or it might have been somewhere around Mexico, Los Alamos, I don't know, but gave him an ultimatum and said, you will sign all those rights over to us right now, or you will never walk out of this desert. And it broke him. He signed it over to save his life and his son's life. And they buried it. They never did anything with it. So I hope Terrence is okay. I hope he can withstand that. There are powers that be, like Bucky. Bucky was a prophet in a way. He said that if you go out and try to change the world visibly, you're out there in front saying, hey, look at this great bridge, was his metaphor that he used, that I've got to get across this canyon so we don't have to go clear around, and all the resources are over there, and it'll be so much easier, and we can live better. He said the powers that be will kill you. He said it flat out, they will kill you. But if you build the bridge and hide under the bridge, and they come out in the morning and see the bridge and say, wow, look at this great bridge that we got for you. Don't know what the heck it is or how it got here, but hey, we'll take credit for it. Look at this bridge. Then at least your artifact can do what it was intended to do for humanity. So you have to make money or you have to make sense. I hope that Terrence Howard doesn't end up being one of the tragedies. I liked him as an actor. I've just been introduced to him as a person yesterday, thanks to you guys. And I'll look forward to watching and listening to that and learning all this there. So I expect that that will probably pepper what we talk about today. And if this is all about Bucky, what do you say we dive in and get going on chapter 5? Steve, if you want to bring that up, who would like to read this morning?
I'm having a little epiphany over Susan's comment about visualizing phi. And I'm looking at the cover of this book. That's about the best visualization of phi that I could possibly imagine. Extended out here in spiral lines, but the way it forms organically in the middle here, rotating on itself, is profound. I hadn't noticed it before until you said visualize phi. Hadn't even thought of doing anything about visualizing phi. So I thought that was kind of profound. Okay, here comes chapter 5.
Yeah, and just while we're bringing that up, I forgot to mention that I'm going to have to leave around 8:30 because I have to get downtown to a dental appointment. So just so you know.
Okay.
No, yeah, no worries.
Let's make sure and leave enough time to share your takeaways before you go. And there's phi inside of there happening too.
Well,
and of course, it's happening everywhere in 360 degrees. It's compressing and tensioning.
That is the matrix right there.
To quote Richard. Cool.
All right, read.
I can read. I mean, I don't mind it. Nobody else wants to.
You seem to enjoy it. Go for it.
All right, chapter 5, Synergetic Wholeness. In 1978, I had a happy fortune of coming upon the writings of R. Buckminster Fuller and subsequently meeting him the following year when he came to speak in a small chapel at Lewis and Clark College in Portland, Oregon, where I was a sophomore. I've been a devoted student in the school of Bucky ever since. While not an easy task to read his books, it is for these who commit to doing a highly rewarding one. Fuller was a deeply wise, caring, informed, and pragmatic man, while simultaneously being a widely broad-thinking cosmic fisherman and philosophical idealist. And his writings encompass all of that at once. Utopia or Oblivion is the title of one of his books, and you could say that his life was unflinchingly and a stand for utopia. Not a far-fetched sci-fi utopia, but rather a practical, realizable and goal based upon the conscious application of humanity's innate ability to innovate new systems and technology towards the singular objective of bettering life for all people and inhabitants of Earth. His idea of revolution was through what he called comprehensive anticipatory design science. His motto, to make the world work for 100% of humanity through spontaneous cooperation and without ecological offense or the disadvantage of anyone. One of the core principles that Fuller expounded upon was integrity. Only integrity counts, he often stated. For him, the universe was a constantly shining example of integrity. He devoted himself to the study of cosmic patterns through which he could discern the integrity of eternally regenerative universe. Through this study, Fuller came to the discovery of what he referred to as nature's coordinate system, a universal system of cosmic accounting that he called synergetics. He documented his discoveries in a 2-volume book by the same name with the insightful subtitle Explorations in the Geometry of Thinking. Fuller's synergetic geometry is one of the core pillars of comprehensive model of cosmometry, as will be further explored.
There's a quote underneath the Buckminster.
That each individual is complete integrity is one of the reasons I don't have to make any effort in loving my fellow human. Buckminster Fuller.
Wow.
So I don't fully understand that. Help me here. When we take some of these aberrations, people who are, we always use the, Hannibal Lecter thing. What about these mutations of a human consciousness that wreak destruction on everyone else? How is that perfect integrity? And I'm not saying I want to judge those people. I really want to understand.
Well, I don't think that quote is saying things like that. What it is saying, it seems, is that he can understand, and he doesn't have to make any effort in loving my fellow human. And I guess in that sense, he's sort of saying, even those that are what you've just described, and that would also suggest that those people, well, let's maybe what you're trying to say is that he thinks that those people are complete integrity.
That's
and that's what you're questioning, which is a good question. Yes.
Well, I think that it's part of the, and I don't need to slur on this, but I think one of the things I'm enjoying about movies lately, even though I think it's gone too far, is that there's a reason why a bad guy is a bad guy. And if you look at Sapolsky and his concept of no free will, and the idea that every human being is a product of their environment, absolutely, and there is no free will. And he makes that argument because while we do have choices here and there, ultimately we're basically biological reactors. And if you want to cure humanity, give children a healthy place to live, is Sapolsky's basic premise, I think.
And that's Fuller's as well.
Yeah. I think this is a, kind of break. I'm sorry. Did I walk on somebody's lines?
No.
No, I mean the idea that the individual is a complete integrity, in the sense that they're acting at what they believe is their best interest, and what their best interests may be perverted, but that's not, but Bucky's able to see the humanity in them. So their integrity is based on their understanding, and that there is not everybody has access to this call. I'll put it that way. And so there's a consciousness that it comes into our existence where we can start to think about things in a way that a little bit more nuanced, and thus it's easy to be grateful and love everybody else.
So if we go back to the extreme example we used, when Lexi was 3 or 4 years old, I taught a real estate seminar in Portland. And a great group of people gathered there, as usual. Steve and Susan, all of you who've attended seminars will I'm sure, attest to that. You seem to connect in a way around these educational meetings that is unique. And one guy recommended that I get a book called The Shack. I don't know if any of you have read that book. But I read that at the cabin, and the core of the story is about some bad guy who comes and steals a little girl from a campground while her father is on the shore fishing with her brother. And he ultimately takes her and kills her. that little girl in the story was about the same age as my Lexi. I could not sleep that night. And I am relatively certain if that happened to my daughter and I knew who that guy was and where he was, I would give my whole life to destroy that person. And that is so antithetic to what I believe.
Mm-hmm.
It is so different than everything I hold myself to be in terms of a Christian, in terms of forgiving. But this whole thing, mess with my family and I'll destroy you, is also ingrained in me somewhere. I'm not saying I just run out killing everybody. They'd have to do something really bad before I would do that. But you know what I'm saying? This, I don't know, the eye for an eye. I don't know what it is exactly. And I'm sure it's about me and not about anything else. So if we take that, I can stand back at a distance and I hear what you guys are saying and have great compassion for any child that was brought up in any kind of an environment or within any kind of abuse that caused them to have that mutation, caused them to be that way. There was a guy who worked for me who was very destructive in his sexual predatory kind of a way. He was a married man. He was in any woman anywhere that was game, you know, and I got close to him and I asked him one time, what's that all about?
Mm-hmm.
You know, how come you're willing to do that to yourself and to others? And he said, when I was little, and he described in graphic detail how his mother sexually abused him. And he said, if somebody can do that to me, then I can do it to other people. And so that demon that was created in him was just right there speaking to me and rationalizing and justifying. And am I to look at that and say, okay, that's his integrity. It happened to me, so I can do that to them. Isn't that exactly what I'm saying about if it happens to you hurt my daughter, I can hurt you? I mean, ouch. How do I untangle that ball of twine? Or is it barbed wire?
I think the integrity is the fact that you could choose something different as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I mean, the only thing I would add is that you know, as you know, we can empathize with people that are probably, because we can imagine as to what they possibly could be going through, just as you had articulated a moment ago, Wayne. But there is another aspect of it, is that there's two different aspects. There's one, your flat out ability to comprehend. That's part of it. And so to choose differently is, you know, you have a higher capacity. But there's also the circumstances of, and when I said we're on this call, you know, we have friends that would be able to usher us through a moment like that, and other people don't. And I mean, that's the only rational thing that I can come up with. And thus, they're still making decisions on what they think to be the best thing, but they're mistaken.
Well, and I hear something deep in what you're saying there, because do I want to take that other life, even in that circumstance? No.
Right.
Do I see it as precious and unique and singular and valuable? Yes. Would I rather see that person fixed, rehabilitated, whatever you want to call it? Absolutely. If it cost the life of one of my children to bring that about and make the world a better place, would that be okay with me? Probably not.
Yeah.
I was, no, I can say emphatically not. But see, there's where I'm unwilling to make the sacrifice that I might expect others to make. So there's all this dichotomy.
Mm-hmm.
A partner of mine and I owned a former mushroom plant in Texas. It was a 200,000 square foot building on 240 acres. And it had an intense electrical system in it, because they had lighting and climate control and things for those mushroom rooms where they grew the mushrooms. it had been purchased by the American Mushroom Growers Association, taken out of production to buoy up the price of mushrooms nationally. So they took a couple of those, one in Georgia and one in Texas, out of the supply chain. So the price of mushrooms would hold up, and put a deed restriction on it. We couldn't ever grow mushrooms there again. That was fine with us. Weren't in the mushroom business anyway. Here's the point. A couple guys came in during the night and stripped the electrical wire out of that building. They did $150,000 worth of damage to the building. The trunks on that copper were so big they had to use pickup trucks to pull them out of the building, and took the buzz boxes, and it was a horrible vandalism of our property. And I found myself saying to myself, boy, I wish that electrical system would have been turned on. I wish it would have been hot and just fried them. And then I shook myself and said, Wayne, what are you saying? Are you saying that you really wish two people would die rather than you lose $150,000? Is money that important to you? It clearly isn't. On any level, it isn't. And so I repented of that almost instantly, but there it is again. You see what I'm wrestling with as a person, with my own integrity? There it is again. I don't have answers. I'm throwing it out there as far.
No, I mean, but the fact that you're wrestling with it, I mean, is really the important part. And you know, again, we may make a bad decision on how to if we're directly impacted about or the result of some injustice. But you know, the fact that you're asking yourself these questions is, you know, I mean, it means a lot of different things, and we have to realize that maybe sometimes people aren't asking themselves those types of questions, and there are various reasons as to why. One example I like to use is something, just if there's a therapy that you find that actually ends up working for you really well. If you had never gotten to know or attained the knowledge of that therapy, then you would have never attained its benefits. So there's an element of ignorance that exists. And thus, by not having that knowledge, you have a limited capacity of actually to better yourself.
What I hear in Joe, I think applies to the broader spectrum of life too, where we have these difficult dark night of the soul experiences, and we curse them, and they're the most horrible thing that ever happened to me, and on and on and on, when we're in them or when we're going into them. And then we end up looking back and saying, wow, if not for that, I wouldn't understand this. I wouldn't even be the person I am. And so there it is. If I hadn't known the therapy, which I probably is God therapy, I wouldn't have had the blessing or the healing.
Right. It's not an easy answer or point. I'm sorry.
I just was noticing Richard had his hand.
You're cutting out, Susan. Is your cat sitting on the microphone?
Now, Richard's had his hand up for a while, and I didn't see it when we had this.
Oh, I'm sorry, Richard. I didn't see it either. Go ahead, please. If you're finished, Joe, are you?
I'm done.
Okay, thank you. Richard, go ahead, please.
Yeah, that's an aspect of blindness where you can't see what is there. Anyway, just to follow up on that, I had this kind of discussion with students years ago around the idea of being non-judgmental. And I was sort of pushing them on the basis of, does that mean for every sort of person or circumstance along the line of what Wayne is talking about? And so at that point, my example was, do you, could you, and they kept saying, yes, I'm non-judgmental. And so I said, well, okay, in terms of that day, probably the most evil guy that I could think of at the time was Idi Amin in Uganda. And so it was like, what about him? And it was pushing in the same way that Wayne is talking about. And today, which in modern day, I really find it interesting in terms of what I'm doing at times as well, is that for those who are very critical of a former president, they go out of their way to dehumanize them. And that's probably how one can justify having the feelings that they have. In contrast as well, one of the things that really don't like about that kind of person is that's exactly what they're doing. Whenever they get upset with something, they dehumanize. And as soon as they dehumanize, then the kill is okay.
Exactly.
And so I think what's happening is that at a particular moment, and you know, when Wayne describes it, you know, very well in the sense of this extreme situation, I think what you have to do, I would have to do, is that I have to dehumanize in order to do what I really want to do. And maybe that's what Fuller's getting at, is that integrity of not dehumanizing anybody, which is, I think, is extremely hard. And partly because this eye for eye has been built into our systems for a long, long time, and which Fuller, you know, takes great exception to in the notion of livenry versus weaponry. So yeah, I think it's a very important question. And on the simple terms, we've discussed it, I think, last week too, but that brings me back to this triangle idea of what's the sum of the angles of an equilateral triangle. We all say it's 180 because that's how we were taught. When Fuller said, no, you're wrong, it's 1,080 because you have to take the outside as well. And what I realized out of that is that when you triangulate for the 180 degree one, you're saying what's inside something is mine, and that's important, whether it's my town, my community, my country, my race, whatever. And anything outside is irrelevant. It's it could be a danger. It could be the enemy. It could be something I dehumanize. And as soon as I dehumanize, then I have the freedom to kill. is what I've got out of all this.
You know,
I'm complete. Thank you.
yeah, thank you. But your comments render me incomplete.
Yeah.
Yesterday I
Okay.
had lunch with a friend, somebody that I used to do business with 20 years ago. He was an entrepreneur, a kind of rehab contractor, real estate guy, property manager at his core. And he came to me, he'd purchased a property, an apartment building out in Vernal, and you could add on to the property. There's more land to add another dozen units or so. And he wanted to do that. And he asked me if I would loan him, I think it was $5,000 for, so that he could do plans and things. And the collateral as it sat at the time wasn't sufficient to meet our guidelines. So I you know, in a friendly way, turned him down. And he ended up meeting someone. He was putting some carpet in for a guy, and they got talking about it. He said, well, I'll loan you the money, and but my rates will be high. So you know, it's going to be 100% for 90 days. And he thought, okay, $5,000, I'll pay back 10, but 10 will buy me a couple hundred in profit on this building. So yeah, okay, I'll do it. Well, the 90 days came and went. It didn't go as well as he thought. He was having a hard time paying it back. Turned out this guy was a drug dealer and a loan shark. And he was out working on his building, and a couple of big Polynesians showed up and helped him put the end of his finger through the planer he was using to do finished carpentry, and took the end of his finger off and said, now, if you don't do everything we tell you to do, that's the least of what's going to happen to you and your family. So he started running little brown paper packages for them from Salt Lake to Vernal full of methamphetamine, and was scared to death. He couldn't tell anybody because they would kill his family, he had been told. So the DEA caught him. He fell into their arms, confessed everything, told them what was going on, thought he'd been saved, but of course, the government being the government, they looked at him as the bad guy, and so they threw the book at him using his own testimony. I went to his sentencing hearing. The judge apologized to him when he sentenced him and said, "I am so sorry for what I have to do today. But there are minimum mandatory sentences, and although I understand how you got here, and this isn't a person of poor integrity, this is a person that got into tough circumstances, and I've got to do what I've got to do." He sentenced him to 2 years in federal prison. And his story, he's writing a book. He gave me the first chapter to edit, and I read it last night. Is all about that, Richard, about the dehumanization. And I lived that. I lived it on a small scale compared to what the guys in the higher ups do. But the government itself, the BOP particularly, and then especially the guards, those guards, I believe, are 80% good people. There are about 20% sadists, or maybe 10% true sadists among them, who are there because they want that power to torture. And they're the ones you always knew that if they had no limits, they would be the ones who would be they'd probably be killing some of us. You just knew it by watching them. But the 80% were probably good. And so I often ask myself, and sometimes ask them, how do you do this? Being a decent person, how do you come here day after day and treat people the way you must treat them in your job? Doesn't that also dehumanize you? And I'd look him right in the eye and say, your sentence is longer than mine, right? You're going to do 20 years here. I only have to do, a few. And you're still going to be here after I'm gone. I can't even imagine that. You've got it worse than I have it. Some of them agreed, but they were all there by choice. But the only way they could stay was to dehumanize the population and to justify what they did, the way they spoke to us, the deprivation they forced upon us. They would have these big raids where they would come in, and we had a recycling center that we ran there. So we got all kinds of fun stuff, foam rubber and fans and George Foreman grills and things that were coming through there. We'd snatch them and, increase our standard of living a little bit. We could have a microwave and a grill to cook with and different things. You make a grilled cheese sandwich, and they'd come through on these raids and take it all. They'd take your pillow, they'd take your extra foam. You could only have that 2-inch beat up stained mattress. And they were going to keep you in as much suffering as they could. What is that all about? Do you really build up a better human being by making them feel worse about themselves and making them hate the people in power? It's just such a broken system. I love Dostoevsky's The Grand Inquisition, and how Christ is on trial, right? And they're literally, that's Dostoevsky, right? In Brothers Karamazov?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. And, you get right down to where you just blatantly see that the people that are asking the questions are the ones that are really guilty. And that they're twisting this to make this completely innocent person look guilty. And then they justify what they do. They will kill certain people because of their justification. We do it in our country. We do it all the time. There was a story about a 13-year-old boy who was accused of raping, a black boy who was accused of raping a white woman. And they sentenced him to death. And they put him in an electric chair at 13 in the South, Alabama or somewhere down there. While his attorneys were fighting to save his life, they put him in an electric chair. He was so small that the stuff wouldn't fit him tight. And so it prolonged the process and fried him and tortured him while he was still alive, while people were fighting to save his life. What in the world is that about? Where is the integrity in that system? So there we go, a level deeper. And I've lived that. I've stood in front of people who have spoken to me as though I was trash. And thankfully, somebody somewhere, my parents, my family, the good people I've been around, all of you that I knew at the time, have treated me differently. And so my environment told me, no, I'm not that person. No, this isn't deserved. This is about them, not about me. And I was able to survive it. But guys, it's an ugly experience to be on the receiving end of that. I don't even know what I'm at. I don't know if I'm asking something or just throwing it out there again to kick around. But I mean, I think it's good that we get to the heart of what Bucky says here in the book. He sees the perfect integrity in every person, and so it's not hard to love them. So those guards were hard to love for me.
You get Hubbard's concept right now of small words and integrity. Just one, not the big difference.
Yeah.
There's also this other aspect of it is that, if you're thinking in terms of the system has certain axioms and the integrity is based on that. And we can't just say that here's the system that's going to govern us and except when it applies, when I'm something happens to me, it doesn't apply anymore.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
so that this is like I'm the exception. And if you think about that from that perspective, that's pretty narcissistic. Not to say that again, living those ideals are pretty difficult. I mean, so but it's just a simple, this is my perspective. I believe in non-zero sum gains and all these other other ideas. Unity is plural, minimum two. All Bucky had a system, and so therefore that's why he could apply that those principles. And yeah, and he didn't exclude himself. He wasn't the exception to the rule, which is often what everybody struggles with. Because when we come up against something really difficult, it becomes really it becomes a challenge whether to live those ideals.
Well, Bucky was the exception to that rule before 1927, because that's what got him to where he was in 1927, and it.
Exception to what rule, Richard?
His quote about the integrity of everybody.
Oh, he was not living that prior to 1927 is what you're saying?
That's right.
Okay, I agree.
He was,
from what I know.
I mean, the first real devastation for him was when their first daughter died.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I haven't really seen a lot of it, but so I don't know whether it's true or not, but the story is that the weekend that she died, he was off partying with the guys, and he was going out, Saturday night type of thing.
He was in Boston, actually. He was on a trip to Boston in a bar in Boston. She was in Chicago.
Okay, that's filling in some details. But anyway, apparently when he left, she said, "Will you bring me home a teddy bear?" or something to that effect.
A pennant from Harvard.
Was that what it was?
Yeah.
Anyway, he forgot all about that. And when he got home, did you have the pennant for me? And no, I don't. And it was sort of like, and she died the next day type of thing. And so he was devastated by his own failures, and continued to feel that way through some of the business things that happened and so forth. So something, I don't know what happened to him in this epiphany that turned that I can't respect my own integrity around into being able to do what he believed in over the next 50 or so years.
I had an epiphany as all of you were talking, and Joe, particularly based on what you said a minute ago, and I can't even quote what you said, but something you said.
Basically the
Might-
system. Yeah, so-
Might integrity at the end of the day be measured by an individual doing the best they can do based on their upbringing, based on their environment, based on their conditioning, based on the entire input into their world? Because if it is, then I feel pretty good about myself. I can feel pretty good about myself if I choose to, because I can get myself, I can stop beating myself up like Bucky at that point in his life. But I can't let myself off that shame hook without also giving up the judgment of others. And then it comes down to who am I to judge whether or not they're doing their best? How do I know what their best is?
Right.
That's where I find myself committed to live now. And I think I do live that most of the time. I find myself unconscious about that at times still. But I'm sure some of these extreme situations, were they to happen to me, could push me way over that edge and make it difficult to stay there. But that seems to make some sense to me. How do you guys feel about that? Is integrity doing the best I'm capable of doing? I think that's God's measure for me in my relationship with deity.
I think you hit on what I think almost, what wisdom is. I mean, essentially is, we don't know what somebody else is encountering and what they, what their capacity is or capability is to do the right thing. Ultimately, we do have to make some judgments, but we don't know what their capacity is. And but we do know what our capacity is.
Do we always?
What's that?
Do we always know what our own capacity is?
No, I mean, maybe not but we know what we can control.
It takes a certain amount of integrity to look at oneself and say, am I doing my best or not? And to even get the ego far enough out of the way that I might be able to perceive what my best is in that
Well,
moment.
I agree with that. I mean, there's a distortion and a limit to our knowing, and this is why we actually have to rely on a systematic approach that is coherent to how we live our lives. Yeah, I agree with that. And so yeah, there's a degree of ignorance that exists in all of us, absolutely. But there's an element of what we can control, and maybe we don't know, because if we haven't been pushed to our limits, that what that is, how we would respond to certain circumstances. But I would say wisdom is essentially kind of knowing ourselves and understanding that we know how we'll respond. We can respond based on our circumstances, but we can't necessarily understand what somebody else how they will respond based on theirs and their experiences. And by knowing that, then we should reserve judgment. And so that's the important part. And it's kind of like, by recognizing that we don't know and the limitations of our knowledge, that's the strength of understanding our own ignorance. And then that's looking in order to act out. So you look internally. If anybody's a fan of Dante, you go down in order to go up. So you look inside into the depths of your own soul, and then you realize that the humanity in everyone else, and you realize yourself, your shortcomings, and then you can see the humanity in everyone else. So yeah, I mean, so the limitations of our knowing and looking inward allows us to kind of rationally come to a conclusion that we should reserve judgment.
Yeah, let me just I'm going to throw a ringer into this because this is the kind of thing that we're all trying to do in many ways, is we're trying to maintain the rationality of something. We're trying to stay in the linear. And if you take it out of the linear and put it into the nonlinear, then we know that we don't know what we're going to do until we're in that particular moment. So it's like Wayne saying that I'm telling you, if somebody does that to my daughter, I'm after them. But when he gets right at the moment that he's going to do that kill, nobody knows, and he doesn't even know either at that particular point as to whether he's going to do it or he's not. And he will make the decision in the moment, and he won't make it out of a rational process of saying the kinds of things that Joe was outlining, really. So, and that may well be of what happened to Fuller in 1927. That epiphany that he had might have been a nonlinear, in the moment, for whatever reasons, he decided that he was going to live a different kind of way. And in order to understand that in a linear sense, one has to sort of think that, oh, well, this was a divine intervention. This was some kind of epiphany, when in fact, all it was the non-linearity of who we are playing itself out in a particular moment in time. And he could have easily said, to hell with this, I'm still going to swim out in that lake. But he didn't. So when we try and stay rational all the way through, then we get ourselves into trouble with this discussion, because it's trying to figure out whether or not I can rationally carry out that total integrity in the way in which Bucky implies in that quote. And the thing is, you won't know until you're in the moment.
That's
and
true.
then you'll make a decision.
Yeah.
No,
Go ahead, Joe.
No, yeah, we don't understand that, but we understand the coherence of the system. In other words, that the system has a certain that we're applying, that, maybe our reaction and the way we respond is irrational or and nonlinear, but the system is coherent.
But you see, this is the thing.
Cost of our action.
This is the thing. You right there, you explained nonlinearity as being irrational, and that's a way in which we all try and stay in line with linearity, because it's been ingrained us in so many different ways over our lifetime that it's hard to break out of it. And when we break out of it, it's hard not to call it something in opposition to rationality. In this case, it's irrationality. Yeah, it's a fascinating sort of. That's why I thought, for me, it was throwing a ringer into the effort to try and turn something out from a linear perspective.
No, that's fine. Ringers are good if it stretches us. So let's stretch for a minute. Again, I hear in what the two of you are saying, in the juxtaposition of both views as very important, because I wrote here, integrity is doing my best. That's one possible definition. Integrity, not allowing myself to judge what is someone else's best, which is something else we just talked about. How do I know what somebody else's best is? And maybe I don't get to judge that if I have integrity. And then we go to Joe's comment about the system. Well, what system are we talking about? Isn't there more than one system? We have a system of eye for an eye. We have a system of turn the other cheek. We have a system of ego. We have a system of spirit. We have a system of self-protection. We have a system of inclusion, including everybody else in the whole. Which system am I operating within? Which system am I referencing? Which system is having a predominant influence on me? in each of those decisions. You know, when I get right down to pulling the trigger, there was another story I read years ago about a little girl who was in college in South Carolina or somewhere, and she was waiting at a bus stop to go home, and a woman and a man pulled up in a Cadillac convertible and said, "Hey, honey, do you want to ride? We'll take you where you're going. You don't have to wait for the bus." She got in. They took her to a truck stop, busted her into prostitution, forced her to turn 4 tricks right there, slapped her around, hauled her to New York, and sold her to a pimp. And she was being pimped for a year or so, when she finally saw a chance one day to run to an officer and get away from it. And she had told prior another girl that she was planning on doing this. She told on her, and she got beat mercilessly and sold to the worst pimp in the city. And he's the one she ran away from. She got to safety. At that point in my evolution, whatever that means, as a daughter, as a father of daughters about that age, I was quite sure I would get the guns I needed to go to New York, scope him out, find out what his pattern was. I can shoot. I've shot a deer at 700 yards, and that I would find a way to take that sucker out, not only for my daughter, but for everybody else. But like you say, Richard, when I come right down to that moment, can I pull the trigger? Part of it is chickenness, cowardice. Boy, I'm talking tough and I'm about to take this guy out and make things right with my family. Oh, but wait a minute. What if I have to spend the rest of my life in prison? What if it causes, am I strong enough in my convictions to do that and to sacrifice myself for that good that I think I'm doing? There's one consideration. The other consideration is, am I going to be okay with God, with this ultimate total integrity that I hold that to be? How far out of line am I with that at the moment that I pull that trigger? Would I be better off to just let go? It doesn't all of the spiritual literature of the world talk about detachment in one form or another, of allowance, of tolerance, of non-judgment, of love? Which person am I going to demonstrate that I have become in that moment? So I think it's both again. Yeah, we have to step out of the linearity to get to that bigger place of being. And yes, the rationality is important. How else can I make the decisions? How did Bucky ultimately turn to walk away from that lake, if not from a rational standpoint? He cognated something that did the math and said the better decision is to live.
And I think that this actually speaks to also the chapter in a sense, with universals in particular, right? We're talking about particular circumstances on how we would respond, and that isn't going to be linear. But are there a set of universals within the that govern us? And I would say that, yeah, Bucky's universal was that he was able to see the humanity in everyone. Now, whether he would be able to live that out in every circumstance, in every particular, is different. But he had a universal. So I think that distinction is important to make, because, yeah, circumstances are nonlinear. There's chaos. There's chaos within the universe, but so.
Well, and I think I can answer for myself, Joe, in summary of all of this. I really appreciate this. It's a valuable conversation for me. It's an important, very important look at myself. I think I can answer that I largely believe, not only because I want to believe it, but because of my experience in Colorado, particularly, and how I behaved in very, very pressured circumstances, that I believe at the end of the day, I might burn off that passion by allowing myself the thought of doing that, and maybe come right up to the precipice of doing it. But at the end of that, I think that that there are bigger, more important truths for me that I would hope I would adhere to, and I believe that I would. And that's where I am right now. Go ahead, Steve.
Human nature proves, Wayne, that that's not always the case. That
I get it. I get it.
that people think, well, when I get right down to it, I won't be that guy.
We'll see. Like Richard said, we'll see. You won't know.
I've heard a couple of issues here where And I think, I hate to bring up Terrence Howard here, but his whole thing was Euclid's whole idea of a two-dimensional reality, this concept of linear, and how Newton bought into it. And I even heard the words today, a linear system. There's no linear system. A system is not linear. A linear reality is 2D. A system is 4D, 4 dimensions. And the problem in our culture today is we've been raised in an imperialistic society that preaches 2D, because then there's somebody on top and somebody on the bottom.
Black and white. Can I ask a question before you go on? Don't lose your thought.
Sure.
Isn't a rational system of thought or a way of thinking rationally, isn't that a system?
Two dimensions is rational.
I understand your two-dimensional thing, but maybe it's down to how we define the word system in each sentence we're using.
Well, it is. And I think this is where Richard's big epiphany happened, where he kept saying, well, how many parts are in a system? And nobody gave an answer. And some people even said, well, 2 things are a system. But they didn't have any reason to justify it. And Buckminster Fuller said, look, it's 4. It's 4. And there are opposites. There's concave, there's convex, and a system is 4.
Ah, there you go, Steve. Concave, convex, 2. So the 4 is made up of the 2. But you don't have a system till you get 2 of the 2. You must.
You have to have
Unity is plural at a minimum of 2.
You have to have a universal in particular.
It's a minimum of 2.
Right.
And that's unity, and that would be 2-dimensional even. But when you get to a system, it's 4-dimensional.
Which is made up of 2-dimensional unified.
No.
There's nothing 2-dimensional about a tetrahedron.
Can a tetrahedron be a tetrahedron without the concave convex that it started with before it was put together as a tetrahedron?
No. Yeah, this is
Susan, and I've heard all this masculine testosterone stuff going on, and I'm having trouble with this whole conversation. I just want to hear what Susan and Ann have to say about all this.
Yeah,
Here's your resolution. Yeah, you get your 2-dimensional planes, baby, but you have an angle of incidence. They are still in relation to the other parts of the system that you are not recognizing.
Right.
The only reason that we can see in 3D, that we have this sensorial input of a 3D universe, is because we're really in at least a 4D, and we're collapsing a dimension each time we have a perception. I think I still get the Buckminster Fuller that the minimum structure is a tetrahedron. And again, somebody, this Terrence Howard stuff and being able to unfold those relationships and see the curves better may help. And these may seem like, even Bucky may seem like a simplistic model someday. But if I take Bucky's axiom that the minimum structure is a tetrahedron and that has 4 vertexes, it's not the minimum shape. The minimum stable shape is a triangle. That's happening in a 2-dimensional plane. And it's created a point, which theoretically a point could be in a single dimension, although that even boggles imagination to get down to the Flatlander view of a single dimension. But I think, Steve, the answer to the resolution between what you and Wayne were talking about are the angles of incidence.
Exactly correct. There are no straight lines. And 90-degree interaction is not real. 90-degree creates that, and Terrence Howard talks about how there are 90-degree angles in computer chips that generates a bunch of entropy and a bunch of heat. And if you take out the 90-degree angles and go to 60 degrees, you reduce all that stuff and you keep everything moving. And the idea of taking 2-dimensional planes and putting them together, you don't just take 2 triangles and get a system. You have to twist them. You have to go 60 degrees to make those things hook in together. And then you have a tetrahedron, and it's no longer 2-dimensional, it's 4-dimensional. And if our kids were raised, there's no 90 degrees, there are no walls, there are no straight lines, there is nothing linear in the universe. Everything's curved, everything comes back on itself. That's our problem, is we've been taught this Euclidean, Newtonian cause and effect reality that is not real.
It's just perception.
Yeah.
Just
And I
perception.
love that she keeps, and I know we've talked a lot in the past about resolving using 60-degree angles. Karen's talked about 120. And it's like, okay, bend my perception some more.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, I should go.
good stuff. Were you complete, Steve?
Yeah, in the comments here, I mean, my heart has been aching listening to this whole discussion. I just
Why?
because it's so simplistic. The arguments are, I'm just going to be judgmental here and throw this out. The arguments are linear. They're bipolar. They're not systematic. They're not real. We're talking logic. A plus B equals C. Well, where's the fourth dimension in all that conversation? And how do I come out of that perpendicular straight line mentality? How do I soften and just wake up? It's a real challenge, and this is not easy, because I think this is the reason why human beings decided to have this journey, was to come to this reality that we're all one. There's no event that occurs without being in relationship to other stuff.
My response to that would be, I can't get there without going there. I have to start wrestling with it where I am. I can't just leap to the new understanding unless I can, but I don't know how to do that.
Well, there's a great song I put in the little chat, "But for the Grace of God" by Keith Urban. It's a beautiful song.
Okay, but for the grace of God, I can't even get to that song until I get to it. So I have to start where I am, and I have to go from here to wherever that is. And that's the beautiful journey of life in my book, the awakening itself, the step by step. And we can, judge each other. As you just said, you're going to be judgmental for a minute and say, well, hey, dummy, I mean, just wake up. Well, I'm trying. And I'm so sorry, I'm not where you are, speaking to somebody who might take that.
And see, to me, that's another problem, is that we've allowed the word try to not mean trial. We've allowed the word try to allow for the word try embedded in itself is failure. And somehow in our culture, we allow try to be part of our culture. Well, I tried. And everybody goes, oh, well, he tried.
Yeah, I get that from Earhart. That was core to impact. Don't try, Yoda. There is no try, there's only do. But that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying
only do or not do, right?
Yes. And what I'm saying is, I'm not trying to, I'm being too careful to make sure that you don't think I'm only talking about what you said a minute ago. I think it's a great stepping stone to what I'm trying to express now.
Well, I don't know what I'm saying, so feel free to trample.
Any way inclined to trample. I'm just saying that accepting others and going back to Bucky's statement here, that I think it brings us kind of full circle. If I can see myself as being at some higher level of enlightenment, and so I'm looking down on somebody else and saying, oh, wake up, you're not at that level of enlightenment, you're still stuck in rationale, and that's bad stuff, and you ought to go get out of linearity and get into all this other stuff. You're right, you said it, that's judgment too. And so is it personal integrity based on Bucky's system? And yet there we are, wrestling with each other, sharing these ideas, with an opportunity to come out of it with something bigger all the way around the table, which is the wonderful thing. I can only get there from where I am, and my ego says, well, I'd like to prove that I'm just as enlightened as anybody else on this call. Well, I'm probably not. And especially if we get down to slices of it, I'm definitely not. I might have a little glimpse here that would be beneficial to you guys, and you have a glimpse there, and we're all going there together, I think, in these ladder climbs that are beautiful. But I don't think we throw the baby out with the bathwater. I think I must own. You talk a lot, Steve, about owning all parts of yourself and not leaving anything behind. I get to own my linearity. I get to own my two-dimensional thinking in order to overcome it, if nothing else.
So just let me,
Richard, you're up on time if you would like, and you go ahead and share, but do you want to do your wrap up now while you still have a minute?
yeah,
If you're going to leave.
yes, no, I do have to leave, and it's a good way to do it. But first of all, in terms of this notion of linearity and nonlinearity, to be able to shift into nonlinearity doesn't mean you let go of linearity. It really is saying that those two are together. It's just that we've been overtaught on the linear side. We have not been taught much of anything on the nonlinear. The other thing that I had my own epiphany a few weeks ago when, I don't know if it was out of our group or another group, where it showed the picture of the tetrahedron in the brain, and the idea that if you unfolded that, then you end up with your two hemispheres, like your two triangles that then can add back up to the whole. But what happened to me was that if you want my big takeaway, and I guess it's part of the takeaway today, is that reading Fuller and reading Synergetics, he says that we need to change from part to whole thinking to whole to part thinking. So we need to start with the whole first.
One more time, from whole to part and from part to whole. Did you say both of those? Is that what I understood?
From whole to part. That's his geometric
we need to
way
change
of
our
thinking.
perspective. We need to change our perspective. And instead of thinking, here are the parts, let's see what the whole is. We need to start with the whole and then see what parts are there.
So what happened to me when I just hang on. Let me
I'm just trying to understand what you're saying so I can keep up with you.
Well, it's just basic Fuller that says we need to go from the whole to the part instead of part to whole.
I get. I thought I heard you say we also need to go from the part to the whole. Did you not say that?
Yes, I said that's how we've been taught. But I also I realized that this is what I've been doing too. I'm trying to think whole to part, but when I discovered that the whole is more than the sum of the parts, I started with the two triangles. I added them in the way that Steve just described, and I ended up with these four triangles called a tetrahedron in this other dimension. So what I'm doing is I'm continuing with my part to whole thinking. If I reverse it, I start with the tetrahedron, and then when I unfold it, I can end up with the two triangles that formed it. And so then my question is, I had four and I've ended up with two. What happened to the other two? And that's mystery. Like all of a sudden I realized that then I have to realize that when you take the whole down into its parts, like that minimum two idea, you've lost two of your triangles. And where did they go? It's like they went poof.
I'd like to expound on that at some point because you just lost me.
I think
I'm hearing our former conversation about concave, convex, and the whole has to be made of the parts, but you said no. So I'd like to explore that at some depth.
I said no to what?
No convex.
Part of the conversation that you can get to the tetrahedron by starting with two. And we said emphatically no to that. It might have been Steve who said it. But.
Well, but this is the whole point. When we've just done it today too, we said triangle one, triangle two, I put it together in a certain way. I have four triangles. And that's a way of saying I've got parts and I add them together and I end up with four. And
yeah, no, you can't.
And I use that argument to say, see, there's the whole is more than the sum of its two parts. But if I go the other way, the way Bucky is trying to teach us, whole to part, I start with the whole. And if the minimum whole or coordinate system is a tetrahedron, and then I take it down into that minimum 2, I've lost 2 of my triangles. And it's like the idea that the whole is more than the sum of the parts then becomes somewhat of a mystery. And it could be an unknown that maybe we never get to know. And that was my epiphany of trying to understand that this concept of the whole is more than the sum of the parts. And I can now get to it the other way, the way in which Bucky tried to teach us. And still, by going from whole to part. And I can demonstrate it the other way too, by showing if I've got 2 parts, I can add them together in such a way that I end up with 4. So again, another way of saying the whole is more than the sum of its parts. So rather than just defending that argument with one proof, I can now do it in a sense with 2 proofs.
If I can, Richard, I know you got to leave, but I think this is really so critical. I'm having it, even though I think I said this, I'm having this big epiphany. The trouble that if you take a kid, if you take me or any adult, you say, okay, let's build a tetrahedron. They say, oh, we need 4 triangles to build a tetrahedron, because they're starting from the parts trying to build the whole. The fact of the matter is, if you start with a tetrahedron and you reduce it, it's 2 triangles. It's not 4 triangles. A tetrahedron is 2 triangles. It's not 4. And if you try to
I thought it
build
was each side and the bottom. Isn't that 3?
you're thinking in 2 dimensions.
Great. Confuse me of that. I'm trying to understand here. Explain it to me. Teach me, oh wise one. How was it 2 instead of 3?
Thank you for the nomenclature. Maybe we should take this next week, because
well, maybe so, but it seems pretty simple. Where's the third one missing? How does it 2 become 3?
start with a tetrahedron. That's the clue. So ponder.
I am starting with a tetrahedron. 3 triangles.
So how many triangles are there in a tetrahedron?
3.
No,
4.
there are 2.
4.
Well, there are only 2 triangles.
No, when you break it down, you get 2.
Right.
But you've got 4.
The 4 are 2-dimensional illusions because there's a convex and a concave. When you take those triangles, you don't put them together like 4 2-dimensional triangles. You put them together by twisting them.
Oh,
you got to go to that 60-degree. You cannot have this 90-degree relationship.
It is 4. So how do we get to 2 from that? You start with the 4. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Okay.
Yeah. Then when you lay it down into that kind of two-dimensional way, you'll end up with 2 triangles, and you've lost 2. That's the mystery. What happened to them?
Well, you'll have to explain the mystery to me sometime, because it's pretty clear to me. There are 4 different triangles in that.
There are 2 triangles in a tetrahedron. Let's take that up. Let's let Richard go. We'll end the call today, and we'll do this next week.
Wait
What's
here, baby.
Yeah.
There's my red triangle and my green triangle making a single tetrahedron.
Yeah.
No.
I see 3. Bottom. I see
You have
4.
to see 4.
Bottom.
You have to see 4. You can't see 3.
I see 4. I'm looking at 4 spatial triangles. I'm not looking at the red and green.
Okay, so take
4
them apart.
sides. 4 sides. Let's say sides.
Got it. Okay, so
All right,
take it apart.
Well, there are no sides, Wayne. There are edges and faces. There are no sides.
4
and as soon as I say
faces.
there's a side, I'm thinking 2D.
4 faces then. Oh, shame on me for thinking 2D. 4 faces. It's all about words again.
So here we go. Here's the 2.
Yes.
And if I break them apart
Oh,
and
you're twisting them this way.
Yes.
I'm adding dimensionality.
That's what you meant about twisting. You're combining the 2 to become 4. All right.
We come out of 2D and go into 4D. And the truth of it is, we started with 4D in the first place. That's how we got to the 2D. You can't get to 4D with 2D, but you can get to 2D with 4D.
Nodes or points or corners and edges. I get it. Because you have to count the corners to understand how many truly you have.
Yeah.
The nodes
The nodes bubble up, so I can get rid of a node.
Yeah.
But we're there.
Thank you, Susan. Thanks, Steve. And Richard, thank you. I got it.
Yeah, thank you.
Good luck at the dentist.
Yeah.
See, and here's this triangle, and to create the tetrahedron, I have to twist this like this.
Yeah.
And
that's what-
now I put the two together. Whoops, I didn't do that. Here's your triangle. I come out of this
go
relationship. I now go into 4D, and now you can see the other triangle would match up to that and become a tetrahedron. It's two triangles. It's not four triangles.
got it.
Yeah, but now go to start with the tetrahedron, and then unfold it in the exact same way, and you'll end up with two triangles, just like.
With two triangles.
Yeah, just collapse it the same way. Exactly.
And so now you've demonstrated both ways that the whole is more than the sum of its parts.
Right on.
Thank you.
And there's the mystery.
And where did the other two go?
Okay, be safe.
See you.
Oh, what an amazing day.
Yeah.
You
how
should
so?
phone somebody. I'll share, I suppose. Are we ready to close? We want to go for.
Yeah, I think we're
Yes.
ready. But tell me how it's amazing, Steve. Go ahead.
Well,
Steve, how are you feeling? And what's amazing? And what do you want to share?
I'm feeling very cathartic, actually. This whole conversation about ethics and the whole discussion is so Euclidean and two-dimensional. And I'm going, somebody said something about detachment. It might have been you, Wayne.
It was me. Yeah.
Yeah, detachment is not love. And this is the Buddhist concept of detachment. Nobody seems to understand that. I mean, I'm still not understanding it, but having sat for 30 times for 10 days a shot, I'm realizing that detachment is not love. And Buddha did not teach detachment. I think Buddhists teach detachment as a two-dimensional way to get to everything. That detachment is not love. Love is four-dimensional. Love is the two triangles. My heart is just swelling because there are no words. I'm thinking, part of my discussion today has been on Jesus, How did Jesus know just to walk in and say, well, you said it. They're going to put me on a cross. I'm no longer going to be here. My life is over. I'm just going to watch now and watch my life unfold. I'm just going to hang on the cross and go with it. Did Jesus say, well, I think Jesus must have said, well, this is my mission. He must have had some knowing that this was all he could do. This was the most he could do. The most he could do was let it happen. And at some point in my life, I let it happen because I'm full of love. I wish I understood what I just said. So, Anne, how are you feeling? What are you taking away?
The quiet one.
Okay, I have quite a few things to say. I'm not sure if I'm going to end up rambling, okay? Because to get from what Buckminster Fuller said to integrity and then to structure and to a whole lot of being linear and two-dimensional and so on, and to unpack that back to what Wayne shared, I think there's quite a bit to unpack there. So I'm going to start off with looking at children, right? Because we're talking about where they come from and what shapes them. And in my entire life teaching young people, illogically, there were 2 8-year-olds that I disliked. Too close to being, I hate that kid, because I'm teaching. I felt so wrong. I'm an adult here, and why in the world? How I feel so strongly with these 2 kids. Yeah, one's a boy, one's a girl, and the thing is, the boy that I really, really dislike, so close to hate, I ended up liking him a lot. All right. He stayed with me as my student from 8 years old until 17 years old. And I think my class was the only class that actually he would do work in and not in his school. But my point is that there is, where is that coming from, right? So I know that I have a pet peeve. I hate people saying something in front of me and behind my back, and they do something else. And this 8-year-old kid, just because they're so innocent, they think that just because they can't see you, that you can't see what they're doing, right? It's this innocent kid, but it really got me at my pet peeve. Then there was another one. It's actually my daughter's best friend, and she was 8. And there's just this girl. She has this thing where you can't sense her. I can't sense her, you know. And it was not easy for me. It really took a lot out of me to like her. And she's my daughter's best friend. And how can I not like my daughter's best friend? Okay. So does it go into acceptance and things like this, right? So okay, from there, because we're talking about the experiences and maybe the life, the childhood that they went through. So but they're 8. So I'm not sure if there's anything even there for it to form these 2 kids at that point, at that level. And then I'm looking at Wayne, when you shared, because when you look at Buckminster Fuller and he talks about integrity and things is whole and not broken, I'm also linking it to the Landmark Forum. I've just over the past 3 years or 4 years, I went through 3 of them, right? So the idea of integrity, because I understand that Landmark Forum, a lot of it came from Buckminster Fuller's, I'm not sure how, I think his input and direction and things like this, right? So one of the key things about integrity is like you on your part, you do what you know. And also it took me a bit to go and dig out the things, right? So integrity is do what I know how to do, what I say I would do what others expect me to do, even though I haven't said I would do it. What do I have to do to have my work be complete? What do I have to do this as if it was meant to be done? So these are some of the definitions to complete integrity, right? And but the thing is, when you look at it from a very detached scientific way, I think that definition can hold. But when you go into where the emotions are, and the right and the wrong, and when someone's being attacked and you being attacked for no reason and so on, then I think we're heading into this other space, because having gone through the whole hierarchy, the cosmic integrity and so on, then you have the physical and the metaphysical, right? Yeah. So that strong emotion, how do you react if someone is attacking you or they hurt your child, and how do you even let that go? And then we have to grapple with our guilt and being a Christian and all that. Then wouldn't that come under metaphysical? Because and like linear. Can you help me out with that word?
Linearity.
Yeah, linearity, right? Because we also learn more about the physical nature of the world and not the metaphysical, right? But then you're boiling that down to the emotion, right? That thing that makes us who we are as humans, and then there's Landmark also talks about life is meaningless. So we are the ones that put meaning to it, right? So but when someone attacks you, how can you not put meaning to it, right? Or your family. But anyway, so the metaphysical part, when you look at it, we've talked about, I think we went into that direction because in many ways, like when you talk about metaphysical, wouldn't that be energy, right? Because even who we are, like our emotions, our thoughts, and all that, I think we went down this path where we talked about energy, because otherwise it doesn't exist, doesn't show up, it's not physical, right? And then that will hit into our soul, our life, and that's energy. And when we move past beyond this life, the energy just dissipates back into the universe, right? So where do we go? So I'm when you all started talking about this, I went down this rabbit hole, and I'm not sure where I'm gonna come out. So anyway, the whole idea of how do you react, and with integrity and trying to like humans and so on. I don't know, I'll probably put it down to our energy, yeah? And I'm not sure how to pull it together with the structure and all that, because that becomes more physical and more, I don't know. But then the whole other part, how we feel. And because, you know, we watch movies a lot and TV, and we hear stories, and we cheer the guy who stands up and you know, gets rid of the person or the system, or the one that really hurts people, and you know, kill and destroy and so on. So is it wrong to cheer? Is another thing. So yes, I'm down the warren, and I'm not sure how to get out of it. Okay. So there is that for me from today's discussions. Yes. So Joe hasn't gone yet, right? Joe, how do you feel, and what is your takeaway today?
I mean, there's quite a bit that, I mean, you know, to take away. I mean, it's just, I mean, a lot. So there's a lot to think about, a lot to consider. You know, when I look at what Bucky said and where we spent most of the time talking about that particular quote, and how it's easy to see, to, you know, love everyone, that there's a certain consistency in the behaviors that he's demonstrating. And that consistency, you know, is based on his set of principles that he's living by. And that does something that's really important to the relationships between he and other people. And that leads to integrity. And what I mean by that is there's a trust that is established because of the consistency of the behaviors that he espouses. Now, he may deviate at certain points, but the principles he's espousing are one thing, and his behaviors may differ from that. But there's, you know, a consistency in what he's saying and what he's trying to do, at least. And so, again, that is part of it is that we're reevaluating ourselves against those principles, and not necessarily, or when we make exceptions for ourselves, that we hold ourselves accountable. So when we don't live up to the principles that we espouse, that there's some accountability there, and that we can kind of correct ourselves. And again, what that does, I think, ultimately is improves the relationships with everybody else. So this is, you know, one of the reasons it's really important to you know, to kind of, you know, to evaluate ourselves continuously, whether it be also through friends or you know, through our introspective work. So to me, I think that this is one of the key concepts. One of the important parts of Bucky is that, he had a set of principles that he tried to live by, and he applied them. And while at certain points he may not have measured up to those principles, he still believed in them, and he saw the importance of them, and the importance of them in how we interact with each other. So, that's kind of where I'm at. There are other parts of the discussion that I will have to revisit, and so think about a little bit more deeply. But that's my main takeaway, is that how integrity is related to relationships, and how our integrity are tied to our principles. So, Susan, how are you feeling? What are you taking away from that?
I'm feeling calm, and I appreciate that we were able to take the time and intensity to stay on topic and to push through it with each other. And I loved all the places you went. I love hearing what's going on in your mind, because you have such a wealth of experience, and it's often really different than what I've been going through. And I know this is going to seem abstract, but we were here. Mm-hmm. And then by the time we get to making these two triangles into a tetrahedron, there's a leftover. It's profit. It's the seed for the next cycle of regeneration. And so that, seeing that pattern, after last week, what I've really been trying to get at is, where is this comparison? I am so used to doing what we call a binary system. And that by design is linear, right angles, and it resolves in this way that I've been taught since I was little. And then what if I was able, I think Da Vinci maybe a great way to, that he looked at the relationships in nature. And if nature is busy cruising on this binary relationship, when do I have the moment? Like, what do I have to do? Do I have to partially close? Do I have to squint? Do I have to give up visual? Where do I go in my mind, in the center of my mind, to start being able to perceive and sense at that level? And then to see that when we start to look at those types of relationships, that by nature, there is this little bit of energy left over to start the next cycle. And certainly I don't have a full grasp, but it's starting to give me hope that that's probably a fruitful way, even if it's just the next model. I end up talking to my patients every day, and I have to keep reminding myself, all models are false. Some models are helpful, and my senses are making models of what is real and bringing it inside of me to synthesize a perception. And I don't think it's just my brain. I think it's my mind as well. And there's so many days when I'm overwhelmed with this life and the things that are in front, or I am so flat that it seems completely pointless. I have to have faith and memory. So it is lovely to have times being plugged in, tapped in, tuned on, and excited. Wayne, how are you feeling, and what are you taking away?
I feel a strange form of contentment after this exhilarating ride. I feel like I made progress. I'm grateful that I could understand the whole tetrahedron triangle thing before we got off the call. I would have been pensive if I had had to wait till next week to grasp that. So that was good. Thanks for everybody hanging in there with my insistence that someone explain that to me. Steve, you said detachment is not love. I agree. Detachment, if you were talking about in the context of love, is probably apathy, because I've just let go. I haven't taken a position. I'm not, love is a verb. And so I agree with you there. I've wondered in the course of our conversation today if this propensity that we human beings often feel to be right isn't two-dimensional.
It is.
Can we really try to be right unless there's this point and that point, a right and a wrong? And so there we are. If we're trying to be right about four-dimensional, what was the word we used instead of rationale? Four-dimensional. Steve, help me.
Linear, I think, was
Linear
one of
versus what? The better one.
system versus a system is
What's the other polar? What's the other pole of linear? We used to
just multi-dimensional. We don't know how many.
Yeah, but we use a specific word anyway. Sorry, I can't remember. So anyway, that in itself can become a be right thing, and there we are again, right back into our human tendencies. So that's such a valuable conversation, and so so prickly in terms of what it demands of me if I'm really going to give that up. So that's wonderful. It will not let me get comfortable. And energy is not physical. Amen. I absolutely agree. It's one of the big steps into consciousness, I think. Was for me, is for me still. I could only see what I could see until I realized that everything is energy and that energy is expressing itself in the physical. But that isn't the whole. That the whole is much bigger than that little part that's being expressed in that particular form or vibration by that energy. And so that's the real gist of my exploration for the last several years, and I love it. So Susan, the leftover dot, when you did that and talked about his prophet, what flashed into my mind was Steve's, I think it was Lex Friedman, whoever he had on there, but that the little dots going down until they found two more to bond with, and then it could, that became alive, and then it filtered, boom, there's another one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
Stephen Wolfram.
Yeah, I think we're talking about the same thing. At least that's how it flashes in my mind about, oh wow, that's the same, that's a different expression of that same phenomenon that we saw in that computer simulation. So that's wonderful to tie it in that way. And as Richard said, to get dual witnesses. Joe, thank you for sharing all you did today, and especially for being more verbal on this call than perhaps you are sometimes, because I got great benefit from almost everything you said.
Thank you.
Tied some things together for me, and I think you were an important catalyst in the middle of this conversation that was flying all around us. You kept pulling it together and expressing it in a way that then launched back out into cohesiveness. And so thank you for that. And I encourage you, Joe, to personally recognize your capability to do that and the gift that you give us all when you do, and to not mute that voice of yours. Your voice is an important voice, and I appreciate it. That's all I have, guys. Thank you. And we'll start on the next page. Give ourselves a big pat on the back. We got through one page today. Yay. I love it. I mean, I love there's no pressure to do anything more.
I have two things I want to add here. Wayne, I want to thank you and acknowledge you for your willingness to be vulnerable and put yourself out there and hold that position so we could discuss it. So thank you very, very, very much. I also want to point out that when you put these two triangles together, there are two nodes left over, not one. There are two nodes. So I have to take this one off. There went one. And I have to take this one off. There went two. And now
could take those off one at a time as you join them, that would serve.
Well, except well, maybe it would. But by taking those two off, I have the nodes I need. So I've done a little chart here. A tetrahedron has 4 nodes and 6 edges. 2 triangles have 6 nodes and 6 edges. 4 triangles have 12 nodes and 12 edges. Ponder. That's what I've been pondering. But I don't want to detract from my gratitude for you being willing to put it out here today, Wayne.
Oh,
Right.
thanks for
Thank you
support.
very much.
That's a lot of energy. The next cycle.
What's that? You have a cat on your speaker, I think.
Yeah, it's a lot of energy to start the next cycle.
Yeah,
That's right.
yep. It pays to go to the hole first, doesn't it? Keep the end in mind. All right. Thanks to everybody. Love y'all. We'll see you next week.
Love you.
Good
Bye.
night.
Love you all. Thank you.
Bye.
Toodaloo, everybody.